Louis Scurti. I welcome you to Friends of the Word. Today is the 32nd Sunday of the year, Ordinary Time, and we invite you to share our homily of the week and our evangelization through the Word with your family and friends. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to hear from you. lscurti@hotmail.com is my email. God bless you and thank you for sharing Friends of the Word. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. In the course of his teaching, Jesus said to the crowds, "Beware of the scribes who like to go around in long robes and accept greetings in the marketplaces, seats of honor in the synagogues, and places of honor at banquets. They devour the houses of the widows, and as a pretext recite lengthy prayers. They will receive a very severe condemnation." He sat down opposite the treasury and observed how the crowd put money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow also came and put in 2 small coins worth a few cents. Calling his disciples to himself, he said to them, "Amen, I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all the other contributors to the treasury. For they have all contributed from their surplus wealth, but she, from her poverty, has contributed all she had, her whole livelihood." The Gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. Usually when we listen to the scriptures, the Old Testament reading, and the first reading is from the book of Kings, I guess right off the bat, book of Kings, this is probably all of the accomplishments of the kings of Israel after David and Solomon, his son. Not so. The book of Kings was composed basically to give us an overview of how bad the kings were. And today's story of Elijah focuses on that. Now, we all know the name Jezebel, okay? Good name, bad name? Is it a good name? Raise your hand. Is it bad? Right, bad name, bad name. Okay, you don't probably know why she was, do you know why she was bad? Anybody know why she was bad? A little louder? Anybody know why she was bad? Unfaithful, what? Somebody said unfaithful to what? To who? Yes, you just leave it there. Unfaithful. She was unfaithful. Well, no, she was faithful. She was a faithful pagan. That was the problem. And God, more than once in the scriptures, we hear our God is a jealous God. God wanted his people, his people. Today, we don't believe that. We don't go in that direction because the universality of our mission is to all people, not just a select group of people. But the people of Israel were brought out of nowhere, out of bondage, and eventually given a promised land with their God. And we have to realize that in that time period, when under the leadership of Abraham, 1850 BC, and then later on with Moses, bringing the people to the Holy Land, God wasn't God. God was one of the gods. Our God was one of the gods. Because the belief system of the Semitic world at that point is that every tribe and every nation had their own God, and sometimes more than one god or goddess. So when they're talking about your God, it's your God as contrasted to my God in that period. The king Ahab, marries Jezebel. She's a pagan, and her God is Baal, B-A-A-L. And of course, now you have a divorce in a sense. God's people, through their king, divorcing from God. Because you either have fidelity to me or you have fidelity to nobody. So fidelity to me, to God, meant Yahweh and one God and monotheism. Okay? Don't even acknowledge the other gods and goddesses. So what happens? Ahab marries, and this is why the book of Kings is about all the misdeeds of the kings. He marries Jezebel and allows Jezebel to not only worship her own god, Baal, but allows her to build a temple in the Holy Land to Baal, and allows himself to go worship at that temple. Now you may say, wow, that's primitive, it's your God, my God. Not so primitive, because I think in many ways we probably still think that way. If God, as I know him, doesn't respond to me, so many of us just go someplace else. Not necessarily another church, that wouldn't be as bad, but go someplace else. Go to secularism, go to society, go to power, go to their own grandiosity, go to a search for wealth. Just leaving God out of the picture, because God doesn't respond like I want him to respond. And part of that is our fault, because if we don't understand the scriptures as they were composed, we're going to get in trouble. Like, for instance, listen to the responsorial psalm. The Lord keeps faith forever. He secures justice for the oppressed, gives food to the hungry. Not so. I'm sorry, it's not so. Are there oppressed people in the world today? Yes. Are there Christians who are oppressed in the world today? Yes. We just had a major storm. There were people up and down the East Coast, hungry. Oh, where's God? I don't see God handing out food. I don't see God handing out little bags of food and fixing things and go on with that same response. It's a beautiful psalm, 146. He gives sight to the blind. We know that ain't true. He raises up those who are bowed down. Okay. Those who are bowed down are now under some literally underwater. He loves the just, and he protects the strangers. The whole immigration system in our country is screwed up. The fatherless and the widow he sustains. If people don't have their own employment, if women don't have their own possessions, and their jobs, and their husbands are dead or divorced, they're screwed. But come on, God, what's going on? Jesus makes God so personal that we have to go inside and seek our greater needs and seek our greater nourishment. And this isn't a cop-out. The people of Israel depended on the basics, the concrete. The people of Jesus Christ, the people of the church, yes, we still have the basic needs, but we've come to realize that our need is fulfilled from within. Our relationship to Christ is so important because he made it important. He made it so personal that when you speak, you can speak to God directly. God hears our needs. And to all adversity, he gives us a sense of hope. Think of the resurrection. That's not an accident that we worship Jesus because he resurrected from the dead. He answers all our hopes, not only in this life, but in the next. And maybe the next is too far away. He gives us meaning. He gives us depth. He gives us comfort when we need it in this life. Whether we have lost houses in the storm or see our sisters and brothers hungry, he gives us meaning by encouraging us to go feed the hungry, to go give drink to the thirsty, to contribute to Catholic Charities or Caritas or Red Cross, to do something, if not volunteer ourselves, to be active, because you and I have become the hands and the face and the feet and the eyes and the mouth of Jesus. In the Old Testament, that wasn't the case. They left it to the king, and he screwed up. So therefore, what happens? Prophets arose. Prophets who said to the people, listen, forget what they're doing because they're screwing it up. The leaders are bad. This is what you have to do. You have to develop a resource of faith between yourself and God. And this story in the Old Testament in which Elijah, who had been running from Jezebel because they had a contest, the priests had a contest, her priest against our priest. Elijah wasn't a priest, but he's a prophet. And she said, we're going through a drought, and Baal is the god of fertility and god of water and rain and all that good stuff. So let's match powers. Let's match your God against my God. And her priests lost the battle. Her priests were all consumed. They were in debate as to which God is more powerful. Her priests died out. So she was after poor Elijah. So he goes running into the desert. Now, there was a drought, don't forget. So he's running into the desert, and he goes to Zarephath, which was a coastal land, a wealthy town. He goes to Zarephath, and even there they were hungry. Even there it was drought, and there was no food. And what does he do? Now, this is very important for us. Elijah says to a poor widow, now you've got to realize, poor widows were low people on the totem pole. They had no rights. They had to support their kid, usually by begging. If their family, the husband's family didn't take them in, they were on the streets. So they had to rely on poverty. They had to rely on begging. So this person who has nothing, this poor widow, in the book of Kings, in Zarephath, he says to her, as she's gathering sticks, she's going to make a little fire, make a little cake, a little something to eat. He says, bring me a cup of water, please. Now, I've never been in a situation. You're in a drought. I have no water. I have a little water for me and my kid, and you're asking me for water. Big decision. I think of the story of Mother Teresa of Calcutta, telling the story that when one Hindu family had received a bag of rice that she and her sisters brought them, she opened the bag, she split it, and she ran away. And she came back, and Mother Teresa said, "Where did you go?" She says, "We're starving, but my neighbor down the block is also starving, so I gave her half of my bag of rice." That's why people like Mother Teresa serve as a 21st century and 20th century and 21st century example of what charity is all about. Give until it hurts. So we have to feel it, she used to say. Give until it hurts. So what does this woman do? She makes that decision. And she says, you know, your God has put me in a predicament. So he says to her, don't be afraid. Go and do as you propose. Get a little water, get a little bread, come back and feed me. She does. Now, this is the tangible thing that we shouldn't always get caught up into. Then her bowl of flour and oil doesn't go dry. She has water and flour and oil for a year until the drought passes. So we say, well, that's a miracle. The miracle is the charity, not the flour, not the water, not the stuff. The miracle is the charity. The miracle is the love that she had for this man who worshiped another god. That's the miracle. Yeah, we said, well, God put bread there and Yeah, don't get caught up into that. Because we have hurricanes today, we have hunger today, we have injustice today. We have to get caught up into the miracle and the power of God, encouraging us to do for others, because that's what Jesus wants us to do. Jesus is not on a hill saying, do this, do this. He's down here with us. He walked the earth. That whole wonderful expose, that treatise from the book of Hebrews, it just tells you everything about our relationship to the Old Testament and how Jesus is the new priest. And the commentary made it clear. In the priests of the Old Testament, they used to go once a year, Yom Kippur, make a sacrifice for themselves and for the other people outside the temple. And then he would come out of it, he would put his hands over a goat, and the goat would bear their sins, and they would take the goat and they would lead it out into the desert, therefore the term scapegoat. So their sins were forgiven for the year. But that priest who went in, elected each year, was a man who eventually died, the book of Hebrews tells us. Jesus wasn't like that. Jesus went through a temple, but the temple wasn't a building of bricks and mortar. The temple he went through and to was heaven, the presence of his Father. He entered our appreciation for the spiritual life, the supernatural life, the life that we all have available to us, and the life on the level of love. If you know what love is, whether you love your child, your dog, your parent, doesn't matter. If you know what love is, that's the level we're talking about. You can't grab it, but you know it. And that's what Jesus is inviting us to live into. So he enters the new and eternal temple, heaven. And not with the blood of an animal, with his own blood on the cross. And he doesn't have to do it every week, every year, no. He did it once and for all. And when we gather around this temple, on this earth, at this altar, we are doing it again. We're participating in that same sacrifice. It doesn't happen over and over. It's one sacrifice throughout the world. If there are a million masses going on today, it's still one sacrifice. That same sacrifice that we're all part of. We're all entering with Jesus into the presence of the Father to come out appreciating Jesus, who became a human being so we could share his humanity, so that we could share his divinity. And that's the level of our love and our concern and our taking care of the poor, on the level of our divinity, our spiritual life. Again, if you've ever been in love, like head over heels, goo gaga in love, hearts and belly, all that stuff, you know what you'd give up to have that beloved person love you back. You know that. You would give up anything. You would give up food. You would give up time. You would do it. If you don't know love, I'm sorry, you're screwed. You really got to go back and love somebody. But if you know love, you know what we're talking about. You know how much you would give up just to have that connection with God, with love. And that's what Jesus is telling us. The greater connection is with love. God is love. The greater connection is with God. And therefore, we can leave wherever we are and go love a person in our family, love the community, go down the shore, help those who are suffering with the hurricane, because we have the love within us, because we have the inspiration, the power, and the divinity of God within us. Now, Jesus is sitting at the temple. You all heard that. Mark is just so, I mean, all the Gospels are arranged really, really poetically, but creatively. If you read the Gospel, Jesus just entered the gates of Jerusalem. People saying, yay, yay, happy, Hosanna, Jesus, and all that. Jesus knows he's on thin ice right now. He knows. But, okay. So he's there in the temple with his friends, with his disciples, and the temple is big and gaudy and lots of jewelry and all that stuff, and people are admiring that, and the big show-offs are coming in, dropping big change into the treasure. And Jesus sits there. Now, don't forget, this is Jesus who is between, chronologically between Jerusalem, the entrance into Jerusalem, and the cross and the resurrection. Jesus is sitting there, and he's watching all the show-offs give and make sure everybody notices how much I'm giving, And then in the back of the temple, there's this one woman, and that's why I think the church puts this gospel opposite Elijah's reading, because it's about a woman who gave. She drops in a few pennies. A few pennies. That's all she's... I mean, even now, a few pennies. What would that do? Father Peter would say, no, he wouldn't. If we gave from our hearts a few pennies, Jesus is impressed with that. Jesus is impressed with that generosity. Now, you and I would say we're concrete and we're tangible. What are a few pennies? You can't even pay a piece of bubble gum with a few pennies. But Jesus points it out. Notice how much she's doing. She gave everything. Why? She gave from her heart. She gave from her poverty. She gave because she believes in God. And the temple represented the presence of God, the Shekinah, the presence of God. So she's giving, and she's not worrying about going home with empty pockets. And that's what Jesus is impressed by, with the giving. Why is he impressed with that? Because as you read in the gospel, in a few days from this scene, he is going to be giving, not pennies, blood. He's going to be giving his whole self. So you and I can follow him into the temple. So you and I can be one with him, knowing that we live on this earth, but we're attached to heaven. We live on this earth, but we're attached to divinity. We live on this earth, but we're attached to Jesus Christ. So what you give to the poor is quadrupled, especially if it bothers you, especially if it's out of your need. If you give a penny out of love or write a big check out of love, if you do it out of love, you're doing it right in conformity with the will and the attitude and the personality and the behavior of Jesus. Yes, there are a lot of people hungry in our world. We can't feed them all, but our generosity has to be addressed to them. There are a lot of people suffering for various reasons, poverty, homelessness in our world. And there are people in our families suffering loneliness. Our families suffering loneliness, suffering insecurity, suffering confusion. They need us too. And if it bothers you to give to them, it's too damn bad. Because if you're following Jesus, we have to give until it hurts. We have to give until it's completely out of us and so natural to give that we're imitating the Creator's Son, Jesus, the Word made flesh. That's why we're here. This sacrifice that we call the Mass is also called a banquet. It's also called a Eucharistica, a meal of thanksgiving. It's also called a communal table. All of that to get us to realize that when we are here, we're participating in the bread and the wine, but also the body and the blood. We're participating in the heavenly, new, and eternal banquet, so that those who are hungry here on earth and lonely and depressed on earth can have received from our abundance of love from the Father, our abundance of love for one another, to one another. He is our high priest, and we're all right behind him, entering that new and heavenly Jerusalem that begins here, in our case, in New Jersey, and in your own homes, and then to other states, and then internationally, because we are one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church for all people.